Usually when I do these, when I moderate these panels, I have to do quite a bit of research ahead of time. But this is a thrill because I've known Herbert, we won't even say how long.
No.
But this is lots of fun. Herbert, why don't we start with giving an idea of how you got into the business? Because it was a little bit of a different route from most executives.
Yes, no one studying law in Vienna actually is immediately committed to the media business, because in our part of the world there was one public television station, and all the Austrians who had any inclination to go into television moved to Germany. So much so that in the early 70s, most of German television was dominated by Austrian executives. The legendary Helmut Thoma and, of course, later Gerhard Seiler, Hans Mahr, who was here yesterday, and many others.
It was the Austrian mafia, right,
yes,
that ran German television.
Well, we were like the Sicilians of the, in Italy. But my personal background at that time was, to become a lawyer, and I was actually asked to do an audit in a joint venture company with Lear Kirch and Herbert von Karajan, who was a conductor. It took about 7 minutes to find out that Herbert von Karajan was not earning all the royalties. And so I told him, you may have a problem here, and if you want me to fix it, I'll try. So I did, at 21 and a half years old, meet Leo Kirch, who, told me, stop it, but if you want a job, call me. So that's where I started, in May of 1970, as an international sales guy in Kirch's then not empire, because company existed since 10 years, but it was composed of 25 people.
That's right, and it grew.
And we took our cans of film down to the first MIPS of the world, and had to book a cinema in the Rue d'Antibes. The DVD, the cassette, the VHS, nothing had been invented.
That's right.
So you wanted to show your favorite Swede a piece of your latest production work, you actually had to make sure he wasn't drunk from the night before and showed up, because paying the projectionist to be there was expensive enough. Most of the time we stood there and watched our own reels, and no one showed up. The good days was also a bit like here. If you wanted to invite anybody for dinner, you posted a little piece of paper on the blackboard and said cocktails at 7, and you asked everybody who was in attendance. And that world changed when the BBC one day decided to join. And with them came all of the studios, and then it grew from 200 and 300 people to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people, and down went the old Palais, and up came the horrible structure that obstructs the view of the wonderful Mediterranean Sea. And I'll stop here.
That's right. So you stayed with filming concerts for quite some time, right? And that led to a big one in the United States.
Yeah. Well, right after I was fairly useless at international sales because we had nothing to sell. That's what all salespeople say, don't they? Give me some product, Well, we had very thin on product. I think Pippi Longstocking in 13.5 hours was the highlight of the catalog. But I was then moved to be managing director of Unitel, which was the production unit for classic music and opera and concert, and stayed there until the day I decided to go and do my own thing, which was in the fall of '76. And after that, I courted Horowitz, who had 8 years before done his last public appearance in Carnegie Hall, to do something for television. And because of the kind of fee he was demanding, it had to be mandatorily live on a network, because he wanted to make $10,000 a minute, which for those days, I can tell you, was like $100,000 now. So he figured he would, on one afternoon in 46 minutes, make as much money as Arthur Rubinstein over a year.
Okay.
And we got him to do that, and it was a fine moment when NBC actually cleared the air for this hour. Was the Bell Telephone Hour, sponsored by the pre-broken up telephone company, and live to the BBC. And because he always played Sunday afternoons at 4, it was fantastic, because at 10 p.m. you had a good slot for European broadcasters to do concert. And a few weeks before we actually did this, and it was like a year and a half in the making, Horowitz got invited to the East Ballroom of the White House under the Jimmy Carter period, and they called up and said, he's going to play, you know, and we're going to have this on television. And in our contract, he could not do television, thank God, for 7 years after or before, without losing the $460,000. So there was a little bit of a bun fight between ourselves and the White House. And I then, for the first time in my life, got, you know, we finally authorized it for a local broadcast in Washington on the public station. And I flew to the White House, and there's a photo of Horowitz, myself, and Jimmy Carter pulling a rug because he complained so badly about the acoustics that Carter said, you know, to one of the aides, he said, go up to the, you know, blue room and get the carpet. So we had to move all the 300 chairs, and you know, it was a fine moment.
A fine moment.
And he played beautifully, and we still own that tape called Horowitz at the White House. But it's not in public viewing.
I see. But then he played Carnegie Hall.
And then he played Carnegie Hall with Zubin Mehta, who was a young man,
right.
thin and fine in the New York Philharmonic.
What extraordinary company you kept.
Yeah.
And then you moved into the television business.
Yeah, well, then slowly I figured this is no business at all. This is just, you know, getting a heart attack at 30. I was lucky enough to have someone at the second German network who said, if you want to continue doing these music things, we're going to have to put you on life support. So you'll do one show a year and then you're out. But there is a company that is a big main provider of drama for us. The owner thinks he's Jack London. He's like a writer-director. And if you can buy him out, we would be very happy. So that actually was the seed of Tele Müenchen, which existed, and actually did own the world copyright to the Jack London books,
right? Yeah.
Which later in the early 80s fell into the public domain. But we started with the Seawolf and these things, and then expanded into drama with British television, particularly co-productions with Yorkshire, and then did more and more Stevenson and Jules Verne and sort of family-oriented drama, and always shot in English, always done with British crews and British directors, and that's why we could actually, you know, aspire to sell them in the United States, which originally the Exxon oil company was embarking on this great performance slot on PBS.
Right.
Just after Mobil had started Masterpiece Theater, they did that, and for many years we were the provider of some of the music that they put on and most of the drama, and unfortunately that's gone.
But drama has remained a mainstay of what Tele Müenchen has produced and distributed, right? High quality.
Yes. No, I think the drama is really the heart and soul of what we do, from the feature to the, you know, big miniseries. But there is in our Class Art label always the classic reminiscence of the old days, and I've reactivated it quite now that, you know, I'm 65. I go back to doing what I like best, which is to make these Cleveland Orchestra recordings and all around the world, and other concerts. We do the live broadcast from the Metropolitan Opera to the cinema, which is something that I would have never imagined would be, you know, possible, to get 200,000–300,000 Germans to pay $15 to go and see a live performance at the Met, and that's actually now in 100 territories. It's been hugely successful. It just seems to work that well for Germany because there is a perfect, they do Saturday matinees in New York, and sort of a 7 to 9 o'clock, with Wagner a 7 to midnight. Sometimes you really get what you pay for, but it's, and there's a very, you know, they've got 40 opera houses all around Germany, so there's a constituency across the board that loves going to the Met. And
where did your passion for opera and classical music come from?
That came, I think, from my earliest mother's milk day. I was put in an opera box, I think at 7, removed at 8, being too loud, but brought back seriously. And I've enjoyed. You know, I don't go to the opera more than 6–8 times a year, but I keep track of it like other people look at baseball scores. I know how Becula sang Rigoletto last night in New York.
I'm going Monday.
Good. Well, the staging is terrible, but he sings well. It's actually a Rat Pack rendering. They do it like if it was in Las Vegas.
It is, yeah. It's a modern version of it. Yeah.
Well, they always think that, you know, theater or film or you know, even the Cirque du Soleil people have done the Ring in the Met, the Page, and the problem is converting stage performance while you're singing has very little or nothing to do with the craft of putting actors on a stage, or let alone directing film. I mean, if you don't come up from the music and you understand when and how the voice and the arc of the breath has to flow, you can't get people to hang off a tree and you know, and become hyperactive and or you know, lie with their face down, and then somebody's sitting on them and stabbing them with a big sword.
Okay, we'll continue that at another time. But
yes.
So you grew Tele Müenchen, TMG, and then at one point, Cap Cities came into your life and took a stake in TMG, and things changed.
Things changed dramatically. We had by 1986 in Germany gotten around to allowing commercial television to occur, about 30 years later than in most other areas. But it was a big political debate between the Social Democrats, who thought that they had such clout on the public networks by infiltrating every single chair in not only the boardrooms but in the newsrooms, that they were afraid that the thing was going to get out of hand when commercial interests would predominantly say whatever works is what we're going to put on. So in '84 the law was passed. In '85 the first broadcaster started out of Luxembourg called RTL, and then Sat1 was the second one that started off in Mainz. There was 10 big publishing groups who all thought that their lunch would be eaten by the commercial television, which, by the way, it was. And so they all put their hands up and said, where can we lose some money? And in the middle of that was Leo Kirch, who said, I'm here, I got the product, you pay, and we'll have a new client. We also were early investors in '86, and we had to fund a substantial amount of the losses that, you know, commercial television those days was cable and very small distribution. And as the water was rising under my chin, I went to see my friend Herb Grannis, who had just you know, started Lifetime and A&E and ESPN and all the wonderful things that at the time no one could really tell how big and formidable they were going to be. And there was appetite at Cap Cities, who had just taken over ABC from Leonard Goldenson, to do more abroad and to learn more in the sense of how the interaction of production and licensing worked with broadcasters before actually getting into broadcast. I think they had the vision and smartness not to say we're going to buy a network and see how we can get screwed by the locals. The approach worked fine, and one day I was hustling her for, you know, I'm going to keep control, and I said, it's 50-50 or it's not going to happen. And it taught me that the best format for any association that wants to keep everybody straight and interested, and separation is possible, and no one's going to take the other one out on a stretcher, 50-50. And those were what I call the golden years of '86 to '96, because '96 clearly ABC was in the transaction with Disney, and we had so many representations in Germany. We actually kept CBS going all along the ABC Association, but we were also the merchandisers for Universal and MGM and the Pink Panther and many things that brought rashes to Disney's face. And I called the first meeting with Ovitz the conflict of disinterest. I said, you and I will never agree, you know, because we're not going to let go of what we built, and you're not going to own it. So the best thing was to dismantle it. So I think in the last few days before the big deal closed in March of '97, Disney Cap Cities, I was able to agree with Bob Iger that we would buy it back, probably 12-fold what, you know, 10 years before. But we kept the RTL2 interest that's still there till this very day. And so we still have sort of reminiscences of those days.
Now, because we're at NATPE, hi Rod, the United States and the people you met here and the dealings you had played a role in your career, right? They influenced you.
Absolutely.
What comes to mind? What did you learn? And you certainly made tons of friendships as well.
Well, I think just, you know, I'm an observant guy, was even more observant in those days than today, but I just learned how to do business. I mean, I've seen people interact at these conferences that I referred to yesterday at the Arizona Biltmore that actually went broke twice during the 10 years that we but it was always impeccable. But just to see how, you know, the news people and the entertainment people and the corporate people and the numbers and how they, you know, they reported and how, you know, well-meant good mistakes were never punished. You know, I remember either Murphy or Burke always said, you can make as many mistakes as you like as long as, you know, you're straight. You can come up with it and tell it. And I've kept a lot of these good pieces of advice for the growth of our company. And, you know, we've added in the 80s many layers of business that we had not that much, you know, confidence about. We bought a home video operation from Vestron, which was a big company, and inherited 300 people who were in home video sales, you know, like a sales force out there. And then we started building catalog of feature films through the Vestron library. There were 300 titles, one of which was decent, which was Dirty Dancing. The rest is forgotten. But, and then we opened our theatrical distribution business, which is now in its 33rd year. And I think just last week we did the 500th feature release, which thank God was Breaking Dawn 2. I never admitted to my wife that that's one of ours, but it is. Should have mentioned one French art house film that we also had, $4.99. But you know, tomorrow we go back to Munich and then to Berlin, and we. So I still do the circle of, you know, the theatrical world, which is sort of Venice, Berlin, Cannes, AFM, and then the TV round, and then the classic music, which has its own little. Actually, just this week, Midem in Cannes, Under the Pouring Rain, sees a very shrinking market for, you know, music, and the classic bit in there is maybe 8–10%. So that's a little crowd around one table saying, "Wasn't it great 20 years ago?" Somebody still noticed we were here, you know. And I'm part of those caucus, and I you know, I enjoy that because, as you can see, it always comes around.
As you've grown the company, you've been forward-thinking, you've been willing to take risks. What's been your philosophy about risk-taking?
When something, you know, is put in front of me, even at midnight after the third bottle of red wine, like last night, and I think about it maybe just for a couple of hours, I always have a very clear vision whether this is something we'd like to play with or, you know, or jump on, or whether we don't think it, you know, we could put our arms around, you know, particularly now, it's no longer, you know, this picture or that picture, although some of these pictures that we have to get involved with are $25 million a piece. And we do the Marvel franchise where an Iron Man is now $234 million, and we, for Germany, for instance, have to take 10% or we don't get it. And if you say yes to Iron Man 1, you've actually said yes to Iron Man 2, 3, and 4, so you're like in a $100 million deal without a script, and usually a cast. And so you got 3 people in your distribution who say, well, Marvel has never worked in Germany. And then you have to say, well, I think you can maybe make it work, you know, try. Not Captain America, but Iron Man, Avengers, that's okay. Usually you don't get one without the other, so this is where you start, you know. But buying into new adventures, like if somebody told me, you know, can we get back into television in Hungary? I mean, yes. You know, Harry Sloan and I, 20 years ago, bought or built really the Hungarian commercial television that later turned into SBS and then later was sold to ProSieben. And for, you know, 10 years, I went 25 times a year to Budapest and learned a lot. But, you know, my confidence level would be much greater now. But my gut feeling then was yes. And I think it's still like, you know, like it was then. If you get gun show, you have to get off the boat.
Right. You took a risk in Lionsgate early on, too,
Yes, we were the first investors, Paul Allen and Harry. There's always a bit of Harry in me. He calls up with crazy ideas, and I usually don't turn him down. But it's a Lionsgate that is, you know, very early days to where they are now. And unfortunately, there we made a big mistake. We got out very early. I disagreed with part of the strategy they had in rolling up a lot of LA-based companies that had small libraries, and I always thought Lionsgate will only grow if they hit a big film, and then they can aggregate library because you need the locomotive to pull all that other product, and they were still beavering away trying to buy little libraries. And one day I said, well, I'm out of here, which is when they found the big franchise.
Right. As you look at the landscape today, and digital platforms continue to disrupt and change conventional business models, what does an independent company, what are the most important things that an independent company has to do to ride the wave and stay ahead? And
well, you know, every time you open the newspaper in the morning and you say this model is going this way, or I guess YouTube made an announcement yesterday they were going to change their format and, you know, become something to do with pay.
Right.
And you know, Netflix may or may not be in Germany in 2014, depending on how Scandinavia goes, and Love Film is there already, and Maxto, and so every time you look at your library and at your, you know, the goods, you get the legal department to run a thin comb through all the contracts and see what you forgot to buy, because usually these contracts made 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, underlying copyright sometimes 35 years ago, never provided for anything that had remotely anything to do with what's going on. So once you can, and so in other words, A1, you have to enormously beef up the staffing in your legal and contractual world, and, you know, new computer programs, new ways of scanning what there is and what you can actually offer. And then the same is true with financial departments, models of royalty payments that monitor deep into the VOD, the TVOD, particularly require, you know, for pennies and cents, a fairly sophisticated program. And then from there to actually, you know, being involved in programming and creating new shows or new formats in some of our divisions. You know, we have people in development who, you know, are pitching shows to Netflix, and or we are acquiring shows that come to the market under the auspices, you know, this is going to be first on Netflix. So we learn about, you know, what the level of dilution in the quality is, you know, given that the network show is maybe $2.5 to $4 million, and here somebody's trying to make 55 minutes for $1.2 million, which are probably $850. And by the end, you have to know, does that stand up somewhere in the, you know, secondary network in the afternoon, or is it just, you know, for whatever the original designed content is? And if they're not in our market, well, you know, what can we do?
Right.
And there's too much of that now, clearly being thrown around as ideas or projects or half-baked pilots. And we'll see February 1, there'll be the beginning of House of Cards, and then there'll be Hemlock Grove, and then after, you know, April, we'll have a first session about, you know, how useful is all that product in the international market. In the meantime, it is, you know, a fantastic way of, in Germany, we have not had the dramatic erosion in the home video market that has started, you know, from the US down to the UK to France, Italy. We are still 7% up in 2012, and the home video market is going to take, you know, a big dive, and it's going to be more dramatic and faster, but 2 years later.
Okay.
Like all these predictions, by now we would have had 40% less revenue from home video. So the good thing is that the new models are starting timidly and slowly, not throwing off any big money in 11, 12, 13 and 14. They have time to, you know, get a little traction, and hopefully that when the home video will really descend, there'll be some revenue for our product.
From what you're saying, it's obviously much more complicated to close a deal nowadays because of all the different windows. Am I looking through, you know, the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia, or was the business more fun 20 years ago?
Well, I think the business was, in the sense, more balanced, that you had, you know, 3 or 4 big deals that usually, you know, a lot of pushing and shoving, and then a handshake, and then somebody would figure out that the spoken word was put in writing, and it wasn't that difficult to, you know, to do that. Today we do little deals that take a year. I mean, my son can relate to, you know, some negotiations about, you know, nothing, you know, take a year just because people in San Francisco are trying to reinvent the geo station. I don't know what, you know, but as long, you know, as it's on broadcasting, free TV, analog, it was, you know, free TV analog. Now you have Windows and this and half exclusive and semi and then another and then internet and they got to be sure and then who has the version. I mean, our market is still predominantly limited by virtue of the German-speaking language. It's 111 million people. If you got the German dub, you own the show, you know,
right.
de facto. No matter whether, you know, you have 200 pages in the contract saying that, you know, it's not going to go beyond, in South Tyrol, they'll see it, you know, if it's in German. They can even understand it. I mean, this is not applicable for music and rock and,
right,
and other
right,
things,
right,
but
right.
for by and large documentaries and fiction, that's where it is. So I think the business was more fun because we had a much more play time.
Yeah.
You know, in between the big deals, we would go out Fisher Island and play golf. Now we're doing a half-hourly, you know, love film Netflix kind of thing here.
That's right, that's right. As you look back on the many deals and negotiations that you've had, are there any that stand out? Were there any shows that you snagged from somebody that you're particularly proud of having gotten?
Well, because my memory is obviously in the early years very vivid, and in the last 24 hours it's still okay. But exactly a year ago here, the announcement was that Charlie Sheen had been fired from 2.5 Men and was going to do anger management, and we saw the ratings of Charlie Sheen's show drop in Germany by 40% when Ashton Kutcher replaced him, and we figured, well, wherever Charlie Sheen goes, we should be after him. And there was a negotiation that took place exactly at NATPE a year ago that ended up practically in a fight between one of our competitive buyers, who was so furious that the people who sold us the show had actually, said, okay, and you remember the format was quite peculiar because they said, we'll do 10,
the 1090,
and if it works, sort
yeah.
of, for whatever level works,
right.
They'll do another 90, which 100 times, whatever, $120,000 or whatever, it was like a $12–15 million deal. And normally these deals get, pushed around and everybody can chip in and say, I'll give you 125, and then I come back to you. But this deal we did, like in the old-fashioned way, you got it. And then the next day when the others learned, they have it, not happy.
Not happy.
Not happy, no. So I think all my guys stayed away from every cocktail party. They're just literally entrenched in their hotel room. But that so those, but I mainly remember the deals that we didn't get, where we lost out and where I'm still bitter.
Oh, come on, still? And there couldn't be that many. I remember you being very happy about Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks, yes, that's a while ago. And obviously we did a big, nice deal with MGM, and we're lucky to now get, the new Bonds and the
right.
Hobbits, and MGM's been, after a while of 3–4 years of being pretty idle, they're becoming very prolific. And in a sense, for our market, an ideal format. They don't do 5 hours of television for, the ION network. They don't do a lot of comedy, which sometimes translates into difficult sales, but they do major big feature pieces and 1 or 2 series like Teen Wolf or Stargate or
right.
something, which has done us awfully well. But we do output deals for our Austrian stations with Warner, so we get pretty much the whole range of what's going on in the world, and we go to the documentary markets and try to, particularly for our broadcast interests, just to be standard buyers,
right.
Which has nothing much to do with the Tele Müenchen portfolio as such.
Right. You have passed the baton on to your son, so to speak.
Yes.
What advice have you given him that you can share with us?
Well, I think we're one of those odd couple father-son duets that I think I'm trying to convey by just showing, not saying. It's one of those.
Lead by example.
My wife would say, "Can you open your mouth occasionally?" You talk enough in the rest of the world, don't you? But I think very early in, 18–20 years ago, I took him to Sundance and I took him to the May screenings, and we did all these markets, when he was still at Boston and then Columbia, and so I think he's seen what I do and how I do it, and I don't think that the way I do it is the way to do it. And I think at least you can get in early and sit on the meetings and see what the dynamics are and what what is changing. and he understands 95% of what's going on in the world now. And I'm trying. I mean, I called him last night and said, "What does OTT stand for?" And he said, I know. I got somebody to call me at night and said, "Anna is going to ask you about." And I said, "What does she mean?"
I don't use the term OTT.
Short of saying "get off the subject," I would have to point at the third row. So, you know, I'm happy to have him around and to help him. You know, so my basic plan is that going forward, I'm going to do, you know, maybe 20% less each year, maybe, and then he can go and buy other businesses and close down some of those that have overstayed their welcome.
I understand you are, while you embrace technology for your company and keeping ahead in what distribution platforms are coming up, you're a little reluctant in your person, like email and things is.
Yeah, no, I didn't have to switch off my phone because I don't have it. It's very easy. I call my office fairly regularly, and if I can't find another phone, I'll grab somebody else's, and then I'll find you know, I'll find what's cooking and what's not, and I don't think I've missed out on much. And email I just do not do because I don't see that well and
yeah.
Doesn't, but still, I get the messages, most of them.
I don't know if you saw in the paper this morning that Berlusconi, with whom you were a partner, is thinking finally of putting a significant portion of Mediaset into a trust so that he can play again in the political field.
Okay.
You dealt with him years ago, before he went into politics. What were your dealings with, and what was he like back then?
Well, in I think '87, when we created Tele 5, the original network, and we were trying to sell half of it to whoever wanted it, Berlusconi was on his big first roll and started La Cinq in France and Spain, and I think he was dying to plant a little Italian flag in Germany. And so over a lunch in Paris, where he was overseeing his newly acquired French network, we struck a deal, again, 50-50. And after that, he descended on us very frequently, trying to tell the on-air female attractions that their dress was far too
much.
Too much, and the flower had to be here, and that, and then he never without using all four hands, and so once in a while we flew down to Italy and got the big picture. I remember Tom Murphy and Herb and a few of our friends were once asked for a lunch, and I mean, I will tell you this, it takes only a second. After a very, very long lunch at Arcore, the butler came and he says, "Luigi, you bring me the book from a Goldman." So Luigi disappears to the bedroom, and they come in with a silver tray and a stack of black books, which were from Goldman Sachs. And they had just valued Mediaset, the company. And a little bit like in the Catholic Church when the priest carries the thing, from one side to the other, Berlusconi brought this to Tom, and he opened the first page, Luca. So Tom, this is in the Lira days. So
yes.
And Tom looks, to Herb Grannis and says, "Trillions, millions? But how much is this in dollars?" It says $200 million or $2 billion. And then we all looked, we basically looked and said, I have no idea. And nobody really wanted to insult him. So finally, impressive. And then the next thing is Berlusconi says, "So can I buy your network?" And Tom, like as sharp as a nail, said, "The network, yes. The stations, no." And I think he could have sold him the network that day and kept the stations, which, I mean, with hindsight, would have been a formidable deal. I guess the FCC wouldn't have liked it that much. No. But we did, go many times with Berlusconi also in Germany to see the Chancellor Kohl, to plead with them to get some technical distribution, because they were sitting on the monopoly of the terrestrial, and Berlusconi was always very angry that we didn't have more than 84%. It was like ABC in the old days. It was the Also Broadcast Corporation. Right. They had no distribution. and I think they were in Raleigh, Durham, and a few other places, Fresno, and you know, basically crawling up to 56%, I remember. But anyway, Berlusconi sits in Kohl's office and is starting to pontificate in Italian, first with a political message. I bring you the welcome from Bettino Craxi, who was the prime minister, and Kohl, who was like 3 foot longer than he was, looked down on him and said, I called him just before you came in and got a bit of information about you. So then he starts you know, being translated by the foreign ministry. There's an old lady there sort of doing 30 years of service, Italian-German kind of thing. Non abbiamo le frequenze via etere, and she translates, the frequency of your letters leaves much to be desired. So Kohl turns around and says, I never wrote the guy a letter ever. It's not lettere, it's etere.
That's right.
So basically they threw us out and told us to go and see the Minister of Post and Telecommunications, who was fast asleep too and couldn't care less. But we finally got a bit of distribution, and then we sold out to Kirch, as always,
right.
for a nice profit, which was when Herb said, you know, let's take the check and run. And that is what's now called the Deutsche Sportfernsehen.
That's right.
And CLT was our partner, and Silvio. And Silvio's actually never made a comeback in Germany. It's one of the markets where, yeah, it made a good lot of money out of the disposal, but the days later, then he started the politics, and I think I'm happy to hear that he's coming back.
Well, he's trying.
We still have a few networks for sale. Tell him. All right.
Mediaset's in bad shape now, though.
Yeah.
They apparently are looking for American companies to take a stake.
Yeah. Well, they have it. The Goldman book is not quite new.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from anyone in the audience for Herbert? Okay.
Silence.
All right, we'll continue. Other important people, what about Leo Kirch? What did you learn from him? And do you have any good stories about him? I'm sure you do.
Well, you know, I met Leo Kirch in, I think, 1968 when I was still a student, and they were running around Vienna, actually making concerts with Leonard Bernstein. And that's how I got to know him. And he, very, very friendly guy. He said, you know, when you finish school and you want a job, and they gave me a job. You know, we were there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 24-hour call. Thank God I wasn't married, no children. That would have been the day. And one day, I think I figured, you know, this is a company that's going to grow and have formidable debt problems in the future, and no one's going to ever be, you know, the second or third. Right. You're always going to be one of the 12 du jour. Right. That will be sent to wherever somebody needs to be sent to. And on a personal level, he was always delightful, very, very entertaining. Unfortunately, he spoke, you know, basically no English, no other language. So the international community has always perceived Kirch through his, you know, men who, and he had wonderful people like Klaus Halleck, who was particularly here in the United States, and others in Italy and elsewhere. Jan Moito later, but that was long after I'd gone. So he was really only, you know, a very big presence, and not a very public presence. He was, you know, he very much loved being behind a closed door with one other. Right. So, but an interesting character. Not at all my world. Right. But I learned a lot for sure.
You mentioned working Friday, Saturday, Sunday before family and kids. Yeah. You've always been able to strike a balance, right? You work, but you also have always been respectful of your free time, of your private
absolutely.
time.
Don't linger around anymore after 6 p.m. And I don't ever do dinner for business.
Okay.
I mean, other than in these markets where at MIP, you know, but even there, I don't think we discuss a word of business when we go out after a long day.
We came up with a memorial channel.
We had wonderful fun, yes, one night, long before it was created. And that's what, you know, we still do. I think every MIP, we're at our 42nd this year. We'll go to TED2 on Tuesday night. and sit around the table and eat some fish soup and have some fun.
And many of you may not know how forward-thinking Herbert really is, because it was at least 25 years ago that at a dinner in Müenchen, he came up with a brilliantly conceived targeted channel, the memorial channel that would be obits about people, and somebody dies. It was Carol Channing, right, who brought that one?
Yeah, it was Long for Life from the Crypt, and you know, they had the wonderful Los Angeles funerals with toupees flying into the grave. I mean, you had...
But we thought of it first. Herbert also has a keen aesthetic eye. After the Majestic redecorated years ago with the Egyptian motif, late one evening, Herbert, you may have been with us, we decided we really didn't like it. And a bit of wine had been drunk that evening. And Herbert and I decided to redecorate all the statues one evening, late at night.
Yes, big. I think we did all the toenails, and other parts of the body.
Yes.
In glossy red and pink.
That's exactly right.
And I remember Monsieur Barrière was not that happy.
We were never thanked for our efforts.
Never, no. But we don't use that bar anymore.
No, we moved. That was the last night.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great.
Well.
Anna, thank you so much.
Herbert, do you have any words about filling the role of, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Microphone.
He's going to hate me. I put him on the spot.
No, he loves you.
I don't really love it. Thank you, though. Any words? Well, do I have to stand here and...
You can...
Yeah. Well, anyway. No, I mean, you know, I've been involved in the business, as you said, you know, for probably the last 18 years, and kindly you took me along to all of these conventions and meetings, and as you said, I think showing me by example how this business works, and I think that's probably the best and most amazing education somebody can give. For somebody then being in that business, but it wasn't always completely clear, at least not for me, that I would end up filling this role. But it's an amazing opportunity and challenge at the same time for me to do this, and we'll see. And you know, I hope that you'll be working with me for a lot more years, not doing the 20% thing you just said. But
only next week.
Yeah. But I don't know what else to say about it. It's an amazing opportunity for me, and you know, after 6 years of doing more of the digital and on-demand business, I think that's something that I can contribute and bring to Tele Müenchen, and which I believe is definitely going to shape the future of the media industry. So hopefully I'll be able to, you know, add something here.
Thank you. Okay.
Good.
All right. Herbert,
thank you very much.
Thank you as always. Thank all of you for coming.